Good morning and welcome to you all. My name is Lorna Lane and I am a member of the Board of Trustees of this congregation. We are the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, a welcoming community encouraging religious freedom, nurturing individual spiritual and ethical growth, celebrating diversity, and promoting a just and sustainable world. This is our mission statement. If you would like to learn more about this fellowship, please look at our website at uufe.org. And please join us after service for potluck. There is always enough food, so please, even if you didn't bring anything, please stay. For the listening enjoyment of all, please, we ask you at this time to turn off your cell phones or set them to vibrate. Also, if you need listening support, the gentleman at the sound desk in the back of the room will be glad to help. Thank you. Just a short morning announcement. Our library, there are some magazines and calendars on the table in the library, and they are always available to be used as giveaways and to be taken for personal use. There is also a shelf of fiction books recently added for borrowing. Not new titles, but still all good reads. Recently, our beloved Kenley Inglefield, thank you, passed away peacefully. His wife Deb was with him, and she is thankful for all the encouraging words. She's still looking forward to many cards and well wishes, and there will be a memorial service planned in the spring. Thank you.
We ring the gong 3 times, once for those who came before us and made a place for us. Once for those who are here now. And once for those who will follow and build on the dream. Our chalice lighting this morning comes to us from Sophia Leon Foz. We gather in reference before the wonder of life, the wonder of this moment, the wonder of being together, so close, yet so apart, each hidden in our own secret chamber, each listening, trying to speak, yet none fully understanding, none fully understood. We gather in reverence before all intangible things, before that eyes see not, nor ears can detect, that hands can never touch, that space cannot hold, and time cannot measure. Steve will lead us in our first hymn. You know, I don't know why that gets left out so often, even if I'm not up here to miss it. It's a great covenant. Please join me in speaking our covenant in unison. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. You know, I do that just so when someone else forgets, they don't feel so bad. Steve? Yes, thank you. RE is now happening. Holly will take our kids out.
Stand if you're willing and able and sing 354. It's long, it's 3 pages, so you have to turn the page, and the rhythm is tricky, but by the fourth verse, we'll probably get it. But we've sung this before, for those of you who haven't. We laugh, we cry, we live, we die, we dance, we sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom to have alone. But most of all, we need close friends we call our very own. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found longing to be together
It is the time. This is the time in our service when we share with each other joys and sorrows, questions, griefs, milestones, achievements. Please come up to the front if you have something to share. Speak your name into the mic so we may know you better. Tell us what you would like to say briefly, please. You can ask more questions after the service of each other. And then choose a stone or a shell to drop into the water. You're also welcome to share silently. Please know that the personal sharing will not be recorded for YouTube later. In a few moments, our offering will be received. And like every Sunday, we will be sharing our cash offering with a community organization that shares our values. This week, we will be sharing it with the Elkhart Symphony, which is very appropriate since Kinley and Deb Inglefield were members of the symphony for so long. We also have another gift given to us today, in that for our offertory, Eric Settles will read a poem of his, and we will also be listening to the music of Martha Pickrell. They both have Lake Michigan in common.
I wrote this poem about this time of year. Lost in undulations of the sand dunes, my spirit seeks a respite from a barrage of activity. The serenity of a frozen winter day brings the senses of nature. Ice chunks gently heave in the black waves, pulled by the full moon, still visible in the sickly gray-blue sky. Long dead leaves flutter their way to the ground and await the next wind to relocate them to parts unknown. Millions of tiny flakes rest in their zigzags across the parking lot, hoping against hope to avoid the salt and plows. Spring and summer promise tourists and volunteers, and families, and love and trash and cars from Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri. But for now, in this eternal split second of winter, peace.
I'm guessing many, if not most of you, are familiar with the term Doubting Thomas. And many of you also know that story from the New Testament. If you don't, I'm going to read it to you. And this is from the New International Version. John 20, 24 to 29. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, which means twin, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. It's a real pleasure to introduce our speaker to this congregation. Kyle Schlabach has been a college professor of English and writing for the last 25 years, with a particular focus on literacy, democracy, and the politics of culture. A trained volunteer mediator, he has a long-standing interest in conflict resolution studies and peace-building initiatives. And this summer, he will be co-teaching a class in Northern Ireland on poetry and community building. He is currently working on a Master of Divinity degree at Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary in Elkhart. Welcome, Kyle and his family.
Good morning. It's truly a pleasure to be with you in this beautiful space on this beautiful, clear winter day. I bring you greetings from my home faith community, Assembly Mennonite Church in Goshen, and from Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary, where I've been lucky enough for a while now to be part of a community that has been discussing many difficult texts like the one that we're going to talk about this morning. In my own Mennonite Christian faith tradition, the Advent and Christmas season has just concluded. On January 6th, specifically, a couple of weeks ago, on Epiphany, or Old Christmas, or I found out this year it's sometimes called Little Christmas, Three Kings Day, 12th Day. There's all these different names for this time at the beginning of the year that marks the end of that season. In many Christian traditions, it's the most important day of the year besides Easter. More important than what we call Christmas Day on December 25th, probably because rather than marking Jesus's birth, Epiphany marks Jesus's public appearance, manifestation in the world, the recognition of this special moment. And so even today, the word epiphany we use to mean a burst of understanding. It comes from the Greek epiphania, that means to appear. We have sudden appearance of knowledge or understanding. But I have to confess, this particular January, beautiful sunny day outside notwithstanding, I feel that we are in the midst of a long, cold Midwestern winter. I feel how deep the snow is. I feel how cold it is outside. And I feel how short the days are and how long the nights are. And it's a challenge. Rather than clarity and certainty and confidence, I'm looking forward to the rest of this year with something that I have to say looks more like doubt. It doesn't feel quite like the society around us is characterized by reasonable people affirming common truths about our shared humanity. I see attempts to drown out voices of our neighbors, deny the experiences of our children, And I just don't see a lot of coming together over our common affirmation that people are good, that we are made good, and that we can work together to build strong, healthy communities. So, at the risk of jumping ahead in the Christian liturgical season, I'd like to move to a story we often reserve for after Easter. The story of the appearance of Jesus to the disciples, and in particular to Thomas. This is a story about the aftermath of Jesus' death at the hands of the Roman authorities. And it's a politically volatile moment, a time of testing and uncertainty for Jesus' followers. What will happen now? All of the things that they thought they could count on as being true, they're all up in the air now. And there's terrible uncertainty and terrible danger. And then in the story, right before the part we read, Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene, then to the other disciples. But Thomas isn't there. Thomas is left out. And then finally, he and Jesus have the encounter we just heard, and we're left with the question, what are we to do with this? When Jesus says, you've seen and you believe now, but blessed are those who haven't seen and they believe. Is he censuring Thomas? Is Thomas's doubt, Thomas's need to touch and feel and sense before he believes, is that being called into question? Is it bad to have these kinds of doubts, to live in a season of doubt? Well, I have to say that I feel like I was, as a child and perhaps as an adult, am skeptical by nature, and I need a more nourishing and useful way of reading this story. If this is the story in the Christian Bible that tackles the issue of doubt most directly, I need a way of looking at this and looking at it in a new way. So the invitation to share my thoughts this morning has been a welcome chance to articulate some new possibilities in this story. And to begin with, I'd like to read just short ideas from two philosophers on the relation of doubt to truth. The first is René Descartes, and you see there's another quote by Descartes in the order of worship here on a similar theme. If you would be a real seeker after truth, it is necessary that at least once in your life you doubt as far as possible all things. And Voltaire said, doubt is an uncomfortable condition, but certainty is a ridiculous one. Okay, right in there, okay. In our story, Thomas is certainly uncomfortable, but is he ridiculous or is he admirable? Let's come at this from a different angle. Why is Thomas called the twin? The name the twin is a translation of the Greek Didymus, which in turn comes from the Aramaic name that's derived from the word for twin. In John's Gospel, this kind of citation of an Aramaic term with a Greek translation tends to underscore a large structural theological point. We should note maybe that twins in many cultures have negative associations. They were considered to be the result, perhaps, of multiple fathers, either because of adultery or divine action. What was definitely the case was that probably these negative associations came with the increased difficulty and risk that came with a pregnancy that involved twins. So I think it's significant here that Thomas is named as a twin. In fact, there is a long tradition in Christian lore that Thomas was actually Jesus' twin. Literally, Thomas the Apostle was also known as Judas Thomas. And one of Jesus' four brothers was also named Judas. So you can see how there might have been some confusion, or even some folks might have seen an elegance in combining those two figures. So Thomas, as Jesus's symbolic twin, actually has a long history in the tradition. And we begin to see perhaps one reason why Thomas might be singled out in the story for a special relationship with Jesus. At any rate, there's another couple of twins here. I think Mary Magdalene and Thomas are also twins. They are the ones who the Gospel of John records as having special, intense human interactions with Jesus. Mary Magdalene is the first person to see him on Easter morning, and Thomas is the one whose encounter is recorded here. So I see them as kind of twins too, twin doorways maybe into this question of why is Thomas's questioning included in this story? And are we supposed to think that perhaps Thomas has failed here, or in fact, are we supposed to see Thomas as doing some positive things here? Thomas's doubt is singled out, but also he's singled out for another reason. He was not with the rest of the disciples after Jesus died. They perhaps were hiding. They were perhaps responding to the political uncertainty of the situation because by taking cover, by hiding. And in fact, Thomas may have been not with them precisely because he refused to go into hiding, but rather went out and did what he felt needed to be done, even in that difficult time. It is quite possible that Thomas not being with them is a mark of Thomas's courage and his conviction that even this terrible event that shook the community that they had didn't change what needed to be done. And so it's possible that Thomas was out there demonstrating what Paul Tillich called the doubt that is a necessary part of faith. If faith means committing one's entire self to figuring out the things in life that most need doing, then total commitment can be risky. It can mean stepping out into the unknown, crossing boundaries, leaving certainty behind, and entering willingly into the unknown. What if that entails suffering or emotional discomfort? What if that means encountering someone that challenges my own deeply held convictions? What if listening deeply and openly to another person makes me completely rethink my own values and my commitments? That is high stakes stuff. And if you don't have any doubt, if nothing is at stake, then your search for truth might not be reaching far enough. 7 or 8 years ago, our family went to see a live stage production of The Stinky Cheese Man, which is a postmodern fractured fairy tale, if any of you are familiar with that wonderful children's book from about 30 years ago. This production was at the DeBartolo Center at Notre Dame, and a few minutes into the show, it became clear that our then very young son, Leo, was uncomfortable with the loudness and the vividness and the realness of the show. I didn't realize this at the time, but this was a crisis of representation, I think, for him. He was very young, and how, as a very young person, do you separate the heightened reality of sound and color and bombast and hyperbole on the stage from your own everyday life that you're used to? This is actually a quite profound question for thinking about children and the arts. But we quickly realized that he was not going to enjoy this show. So since we were in the front row, I scooped him up and we made a beeline for the back exit, while our older son Thomas and my wife Jessica stayed. And Thomas turned out to be one of the children from the audience called up on stage. Apparently had a tour de force turn as Goldilocks, which I very much regret missing. But Leo and I spent the next hour walking around the quadrangles of the Notre Dame campus. And we were paying particular attention to all of the wonderful public art that they have there. And one particularly notable stop was a life-size sculpted scene of Jesus teaching a crowd of people. And Leo thought these people, these sculptures, were fascinating. And I encouraged him to walk over and take a closer look. And just as I was congratulating myself on being such a clever parent, I noticed him to reach out and touch the statue of Jesus. And he was reaching right up towards Jesus' face. And I was just about to say, oh, please don't, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to touch sculptures. But too late. His hand had already reached out, one little tiny little finger, and boop, stuck it right up statue Jesus' nose. And I think it was doubt that prompted him to do that. Like, I don't think this is a real person. Or if it is, what'll happen if I touch his nose? Does he have nostrils? Like, I don't know what question was in his mind. But clearly there were a wonderful series of questions that he was formulating. And even more than that, it's not just that he was asking the questions, it was that he had this human impulse to reach out and look for answers to those questions. I thought that was wonderful. So I looked around to see if anyone had observed our unsanctioned investigation of the materiality of Jesus. And we hustled away, having no idea that this would someday become a sermon anecdote. Looking back, I realize now that maybe it was a moment we should have celebrated, and I might even call it a holy moment. Because the doubt that he was expressing there is not the absence of faith. I think doubt is a part of faith. It's a hunger and a need to reach out and touch the mysteries that knot us together as people. I think that my son's urge to reach out was Thomas's urge in the text, the Apostle Thomas's urge in the text. We all, as people, need to explore with our senses and to process our material and emotional, spiritual ties to the people around us and the world around us. In a very real sense, it's doubt that drives us to do this important work of reaching out and connecting. And I think the story of Thomas's encounter with Jesus is really about that. When we come face to face with life and with death, what choice do we have but to try to reach out and touch the insensible? To touch it, to taste it, to smell it, even to represent it. For 2 millennia now, the story of Thomas has been a license to make art. It valorizes our efforts to reach out and touch the deep complexities of our existence and to represent even the terrible and unrepresentable truths about life and death and mortality and human finitude. If we can't make sense of life and death with our intellects, we don't give up. We just try to make sense of them with our hands and our paint and our pens. This reminds me of a joke that I know. There was once a Sunday school class where the teacher let the young children have drawing time as kind of a special creative moment. And she went around to each child and asked what they were drawing. And she got to one little girl and she said to the girl, "Oh, what are you drawing?" And the girl said, "Oh, I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher said, Oh, honey, sweetheart, nobody knows what God looks like." And the little girl said, "They will in a minute." So reality is complex, and we have a drive to explore that complexity, represent that complexity, and make it knowable. Sometimes we succumb to a misguided attempt to make it all fit together more easily. People instead of embracing complexity, are tempted to simplify it. Sometimes we even try to protect our children's innocence or our own by trimming the hard truths of reality down to size. But this is dangerous and can have disastrous consequences. Here's a poem by Billy Collins called The History Teacher. Trying to protect his students' innocence, he told them the Ice Age was really just the Chili Age, a period of 1,000,000 years when everyone had to wear sweaters. And the Stone Age became the Gravel Age, named after the long driveways of the time. The Spanish Inquisition was nothing more than an outbreak of questions, such as, how far is it from here to Madrid, and what do you call a matador's hat? The War of the Roses took place in a garden, and the Enola Gay dropped one tiny atom on Japan. The children would leave his classroom for the playground to torment the weak and the smart, mussing their hair and breaking their glasses. And while he gathered up his notes and walked home past flower beds and white picket fences, wondering if they would believe that soldiers in the Boer War told long, rambling stories designed to make the enemy nod off. There's a terrible moral trajectory there, trying to shrink the world into easily digestible certainties, trying to make reality too small for doubt can distort our moral compass. If we're tempted to make things fit by dismissing the experiences and perspectives of others when they're too complicated for us, when they conflict with our own, we can get an unhealthy attachment to oversimplification. That can prime us for bullying and violence, makes a virtue of selfishness, and mistakes cruelty for faith. We see this around us too frequently, I think, today. In the faith of destructive certainty, we must hold on to our doubt. Because doubt leads us to investigate the world in its dizzying complexity. Some people call relying on all of this data from our senses empiricism and dismiss it. I call it poetry. And here's Mary Oliver's poem, Foolishness. No, it's not. Sometimes I spend all day trying to count the leaves on a single tree. To do this, I have to climb branch by branch and write down the numbers in a little book. So I suppose from their point of view, it's reasonable that my friends say, what foolishness. She's got her head in the clouds again. But it's not. Of course I have to give up, but by then I'm half crazy with the wonder of it. The abundance of the leaves, the quietness of the branches, the hopelessness of my effort. And in that delicious and important place, I roar with laughter full of earth praise. So let's be clear, doubt can be joyful, can lead to a way of experiencing the world that I would call, based on what we've just heard in that poem, Oliverian. And conversely, realizing that one has one's doubts shouldn't be debilitating or burdensome. I'm not praising that feeling that we unfortunately sometimes label self-doubt. It's not what I would call true doubt. True doubt is about learning and investigating and exploring. Self-doubt is an attitude of dismissal aimed not at the knowable world outside of ourselves, but at our own centers and our own selves, a persistent low-level attack on our own being. Labeling this kind of assault on our very integrity as persons as self-doubt is an injustice to the noble and healthy tradition of doubt. As Jesus says in Matthew 7:17, Every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. So let's be brave enough to take debilitating and life-denying self-doubt and throw it into the fire. But let's think about the good fruit that's born out of a healthy practice of skepticism and out of learning how to live productively with doubt. What are the signs of this good fruit, of living fruitfully with our doubt? We've just talked about the first one. A healthy doubt is consistent with an ethic of self-care. It doesn't lead to paranoia aimed at either the self or at others, but to an honest accounting of our own strengths and weaknesses, and crucially, to what we know and what we don't know. So that's the second feature of a healthy relationship. We can approach the beliefs and experiences of others with humility, and not self-doubt, but humility. Our doubts do not lead us to be closed off and reject the experience and stories of others, even those we disagree with, but remind us of the perfectly normal human limits of our own understandings and our own experiences. That we need the ideas and testimonies of others to fill in those spaces where we can't see or know what's happening or what it's like. This doesn't mean that we'll all agree with everyone we hear, but doubt reminds us that we should never stop listening to others, because this alerts us to new possibilities. And that's the final good fruit of our tree of doubt. It should keep us open to other people, to relating to those around us with love and compassion. There is no fact that we think we know, nothing that we think we know about someone else that justifies dismissing them in their full humanity, that justifies dismissing their capacity to surprise us. And that's the good news that comes from a healthy theology of doubt. We can reverse the polarity of that old saying, "Oh, I have my doubts." No, I say, whatever else I may or may not have, I have my doubts. That's an affirmation. So I'll leave you with this, the ending of an essay by George Saunders from his book, The Brain Dead Megaphone. Just before I doze off, I counsel myself grandiosely. Forget concepts. Don't be afraid to be confused. Try to remain permanently confused. Anything is possible. Stay open forever. So open it hurts. And then open up some more. Until the day you die, world without end. Amen. Indeed.
Hello? Hello? Okay, this will work. All right. I thought this was a perfect sermon topic for you use, because this is a place where we sort of hold doubt sacred and do not shy away from it. Questions or comments?
Yes.
Well, I grew up Catholic, and I attended St. Thomas, which is Doubting Thomas
Yes.
on Main Street here. So the beautiful mosaic is of Doubting Thomas. So I spent the majority of my life every Sunday or Saturday when we attended staring at that mosaic, right? So, and I was the million question kid. Okay, so what I'd like to put forth is, I don't have answers, this is a bit of a commentary, is blind faith, is that truly faith? You know, to believe blindly into something based on fear, where I feel doubt is a healthy form of self-love, self-preservation, curiosity. I don't find doubt negative in any way. So, and I'm going to keep this a little clean, because as a teenager, the Catholic has to profess faith. And there's a line, only say the word and you shall be healed. And I used to say, what the blankety blank is that word so I can be healed? I used to sit there every time that was said. So there was my doubt and my anger for not having a clear answer. And the other thing is the word grace. We always had every single teacher I ever asked this question is, what is grace? Oh, it's a mystery. Oh. And what I wanted to say is I physically had an experience of what grace is. It's a frequency. So when you say, Hail Mary, full of grace, she was in a flow of grace. It's a physical, visceral, energetic experience. So when Thomas is putting his hand in the hands and I don't find that bad at all. Because you know what? That materialized Jesus in reality. Because the question is, this is my question, is he appeared out of nowhere. Hello? How could Thomas feel him then if he was magically appearing from the ethers? How did he get in the room? That's my question. And why is it that the Christian faith focuses on the crucifixion rather than the resurrection? He was physically present for 40 years. That's my question. That's what I want answers. That's where I live in.
I don't think we have time for.
Well, I will simply say this. I thought that was a striking and insightful response. I love that you raised that passage, just say the word and you will be healed. I think there are people who would say, teachers who would say, with some insight, that that's exactly right. Once it's more important to you to ask the question than to know what the word is, then you're on the path to healing, right? And so there is a perspective change that can happen in a very healthy way that I think that you're pointing us to. I think that's very, very insightful.
Thank you.
I've always liked the song that we sing and will be singing again, We Laugh, We Cry. The end line of that last verse, to question, truly is the answer.
Which is why I picked that song.
I guess my concern sometimes is the fear that comes with the doubt.
Yes, and I think fear is a legitimate and important part of life. I was actually in a class this week. We were talking about anger, and a lot of people in my class were observing that in some of our faith traditions there was a theological problem with how we are taught to deal with anger. We're taught that anger is a sign that things are already going off the rails, which anger is a sign that something needs attention, right? Something might not be right, might not be fair. But then we're taught to push it down. Like peace is ignoring your anger, making it invisible, rather than saying, okay, I think I'm angry right now. I can live with that. I want to look that squarely on and say, what is wrong that needs attention? And fear, I think maybe we can try to have a similar kind of rethinking of our relationship with fear, right? Fear may well mean that there is real danger. Fear may well mean that mortality is scary, that it is tricky and sometimes difficult to be a person, to be a human being. But then the question is, what do we do with that fear? Does it keep us does it drive us into hiding and does it defeat us? Or do we decide to let fear be our companion and walk where we need to walk? And I think that's a difficult challenge, but a real one.
I'm going to take the last word, and I believe that if we do deal with our fears directly, we'll find we have a lot less anger. Thank you so much, Kyle.
Thank you all, and thank you for your thoughtful responses.
Steve is going to lead us in our last partial hymn, and then please remain standing for the benediction, and then we be seated for the post-vote.
Steve, there's no introduction either, so you're going to jump right in.
Okay. William, this is for you. Last verse. Get ready. Seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together here to accept what we find, and we believe and learn, and in the strength of love, and we have found our joy being together, and in the search for peace, may we finally see, even to question truly is an
As a benediction, I'd like to read a blessing by the Irish poet and priest and philosopher John O'Donohue that I have slightly adapted for our purposes this morning. This is the time to be slow. Lie low to the wall until the bitter weather passes. Try, as best you can, not to let the wire brush of doubt scrape from your heart all sense of yourself and your hesitant light. Instead, let it uncover the shape of things that call you back to yourself. May it illuminate the world with the long, low angle of winter light. If you remain generous, time will come good, and you will feel your feet again on fresh pastures of promise, where the air will be kind and blushed is beginning.
Hello, lovely people. It's funny how songs come about sometimes, because my partner, songwriting partner, my nephew Ryan, sent me a song that he called Freedom Jail. But we ended up working on that song, developing a little bit, and it turned out the title didn't really fit what we ended up with. But I thought, that's a pretty interesting title, Freedom Jail. And I was thinking about how we, especially in this country, we talk about being free. We're so free, we can do whatever we want to. But in some ways, that kind of creates a little bit of a jail. And it's interesting, so I wrote this song, Freedom Jail. And it's kind of weird how well it fits in with Kyle's message, which is just totally an accident. So Terry's going to play a little bit of an intro, and then I'm going to play the song. I was born in a freedom jail where no one could pay my bail. My bills were as high as the clouds flying by, so I caught one and pulled it down. I was lost in a desert of water, couldn't have been any hotter. My throat was dry, my eyes went wide when I sighted the sea king's daughter. Land ho, land ho, land ho, 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 ho. I was sent to the heavens of hell. It was funny how high I fell. I walked on a cloud and I shouted out loud that that Lucifer was my brother. We fought in a war of peace. Hostilities never would cease. One side was obscene, the other was green. We ended up switching places. Land ho, land ho, land ho, 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 ho. Lovely lady, where are you going? Can you wait for me? Go right string. Slowly sinking in the deep blue waters. Where did you go? I was born in a freedom jail where no one could pay my bail. My bills were as high as the clouds flying by, so I caught one and pulled it down.